The blood-red sunset painted the Montana sky, as Katherine Quinn buried what was left of her heart in the shallow grave at her feet. She stood on the hill overlooking the humble ranch that had been her home for the past 6 years, clutching her husband's worn hat against her chest while their 5-year-old daughter, Emma, clung to her skirts. It was September 1878, and Catherine Kate, to those who knew her, had just become another widow in a land that seemed to manufacture them with cruel efficiency. "Is Pa with the angels now, Mama?" Emma whispered, her voice small against the vastness of the prairie. Kate swallowed hard, feeling the weight of motherhood pressing down on her shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart, your Pa's watching over us from heaven now. 2 weeks." That's all it had taken for typhoid fever to reduce her strong, vibrant husband from the man who could break a wild Mustang to nothing more than a memory and a wooden cross. Now, Kate stood alone with a 5-year-old daughter, a struggling cattle ranch, and winter on the horizon. "We need to head back down," Kate said, taking Emma's small hand in hers. "The light's fading fast." As they made their way down the hill toward their cabin, Kate's mind raced with calculations and worries. James had left them with little money, a half-dozen cattle, 2 horses, and a small plot of land that was barely enough to sustain them. The nearest town, Willow Creek, was half a day's ride away, and Kate had few skills that would earn her a living there. That night, after tucking Emma into bed with promises that tomorrow would be better, Kate sat at their rough-hewn table with James's ledger open before her. The numbers didn't lie. They had enough supplies to last perhaps 2 months, and then Kate closed the book and buried her face in her hands. "We'll make it, James," she whispered to the empty room. "I won't let everything you built slip away. I promise." Dawn broke with the insistent crowing of their rooster, and Kate rose from a fitful sleep to face her first day as the sole proprietor of the Quinn Ranch. She pulled on her work dress, twisted her dark hair into a practical bun, and stepped outside to begin her chores. The September morning carried a chill that warned of the coming winter, but Kate worked through it, feeding the livestock, collecting eggs, and checking fences. Her hands, once soft from a life in the East before she'd followed James west as a new bride, were now calloused and strong. She was grateful for that strength as she hauled water from the well. By midday, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. There was simply too much for one person to manage. James had always handled the heavy labor, while Kate maintained their home and tended the garden that supplemented their meals. Now it all fell to her. "Mama, I'm hungry," Emma called from the porch, where Kate had instructed her to stay while she worked. "Coming, sweet pea," Kate replied, setting down the axe she'd been using to split wood. She'd managed only a small pile, nowhere near what they'd need for the coming cold. Inside their small cabin, Kate prepared a simple meal of cornbread and beans. As they ate, Emma chatted about the clouds she'd been watching and the squirrel that had scampered across the yard. Her innocence was both a balm and a burden to Kate's worried heart. "When is Pa coming back?" Emma asked suddenly, her blue eyes so like her father's, wide and trusting. Kate's throat constricted. "Emma, remember what we talked about. Pa isn't coming back. He's gone to heaven." Emma's face crumpled. "But I want him to come back." "I know, sweetheart. I want that too," Kate said, gathering her daughter into her arms as tears spilled onto Emma's cheeks. That night and many that followed, Kate held her sobbing daughter, humming the hymns she remembered from church back east. The familiar melodies seemed to calm Emma, though her sleep remained fitful and filled with calls for her father. By the 3rd week after James's death, Kate knew they were in trouble. The fence on the north side had collapsed completely, allowing 2 of their precious cattle to wander off. She'd spent an entire day searching for them to no avail. The pile of firewood remained woefully inadequate, and she'd worn blisters into her hands trying to split enough logs. It was after a particularly difficult day, when everything seemed to go wrong from a leak in the roof to Emma's inconsolable crying that Kate made her decision. They would have to go into town and seek help. Perhaps she could find work washing laundry or cooking for one of the establishments. It wouldn't be ideal, but it would be better than watching her daughter starve. The next morning, Kate loaded Emma and a few belongings into their small wagon, hitched their mare, Willow, and set off for Willow Creek. The journey took most of the day, with Emma alternating between excitement at the adventure and tear-filled questions about when they would return home. Willow Creek was hardly the bustling metropolis that some western towns had become, but to Kate's eyes, accustomed now to the isolation of their ranch, it seemed overwhelming. The main street was lined with the essential businesses: a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and a smattering of other enterprises necessary for frontier life. Kate stopped the wagon in front of the general store, helping Emma down before tying Willow to the hitching post. "Stay close to me," she instructed her daughter as they entered the store. The proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, was a round man with kind eyes who had always treated James fairly in their dealings. His expression softened with sympathy when he saw Kate and Emma. "Mrs. Quinn, I was mighty sorry to hear about James," he said, coming around the counter. "A finer man I never knew." Kate nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. It's been difficult, I can imagine. What can I do for you today?" "I was wondering if you knew of any work available in town. With James gone, She paused, unwilling to detail the extent of her desperation in front of Emma. Mr. Jenkins scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Can't say I know of much right now. Mrs. Peterson at the hotel sometimes needs help with laundry, and the saloon's always looking for girls, though I suspect that's not your cup of tea." Kate's face flushed at the suggestion. "No, it's not, but thank you. I'll check with Mrs. Peterson." She purchased a few essential supplies, wincing at how quickly their meager funds were depleting, and then led Emma across the street to the Willow Creek Hotel. Mrs. Peterson, a severe woman with iron-gray hair, listened to Kate's situation with a frown. "I can give you laundry work 2 days a week," she finally offered. "It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work." "Thank you," Kate said, relief washing through her. It wouldn't be enough, but it was something. "When can I start?" "Monday next. Be here at sunrise." As Kate and Emma left the hotel, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows down the main street. Kate realized with a sinking heart that they would have to make the long journey back to the ranch in the dark, or spend money they didn't have on a room for the night. "Mama, I'm tired," Emma complained, dragging her feet. "I know, sweetheart. We'll be home soon," Kate promised, though she wasn't at all certain how they would manage the trip. As they approached their wagon, Kate noticed a commotion further down the street. A group of men had gathered outside the saloon, their voices raised in anger. Kate instinctively pulled Emma closer, turning to shield her from whatever was unfolding. The sound of a gunshot cracked through the air, followed by shouts and the thunder of hooves. Kate scooped Emma into her arms and pressed against the side of the general store, her heart racing as 3 riders tore down the main street, guns drawn. "Get inside!" Someone yelled, and Kate didn't hesitate. She yanked open the door to the general store and rushed in, Emma clinging to her neck. "Bank robbery," Mr. Jenkins said grimly, peering through the window. "Sheriff's after them, but they're headed out of town fast." Kate's mind immediately went to their remote ranch, directly in the path the robbers had taken. "We need to get home," she said urgently. "Our ranch is in that direction." Mr. Jenkins shook his head. "Not safe, Mrs. Quinn. Those are the Blackwell brothers, meanest gang in the territory. You'd best stay in town tonight." Fear coiled in Kate's stomach. She thought of their isolated cabin, their few remaining cattle, and everything they had left in the world. "I can't afford a room," she admitted quietly. "You can stay with my wife and me," Mr. Jenkins offered without hesitation. "We've got a spare room since our boy moved to Denver." Kate wanted to refuse out of pride, but one look at Emma's frightened face made the decision for her. "Thank you. That's very kind." That night in the Jenkins' comfortable spare room, Kate lay awake long after Emma had finally drifted off to sleep. Her worries multiplied in the darkness. If the Blackwell gang had passed through their property, they might have taken more of their livestock or, worse, vandalized their home. The laundry work wouldn't be enough to sustain them, especially if they suffered more losses. And winter was coming. Morning arrived with rain pattering against the windows, further delaying their return to the ranch. Mr. Jenkins insisted they stay for breakfast, during which Mrs. Jenkins, a motherly woman with flour permanently embedded in her fingernails, pressed a packet of biscuits into Kate's hands for the journey. By midday, the rain had eased to a drizzle, and Kate knew they couldn't delay any longer. She thanked the Jenkins for their hospitality and loaded Emma back into the wagon for the journey home. The roads had turned to mud, making the trip even more arduous than usual. Willow struggled in places, and twice Kate had to get down to push the wagon through particularly deep sections. Emma, initially cheerful despite the weather, eventually grew cranky and tired. "I want to go home to Pa," she whimpered as the afternoon wore on. "We're going home," Kate assured her, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Home wasn't home anymore without James. It was late afternoon when they finally approached their property. Kate's stomach knotted with anxiety as they drew closer, half expecting to see smoke rising from a burning cabin or their remaining cattle stolen. What she saw instead stopped her breath. A man stood on their porch, tall and broad-shouldered in a worn leather duster. For one wild, impossible moment, Kate thought it was James, somehow returned to them. Then reality reasserted itself as the stranger turned at the sound of their approaching wagon. He raised a hand in greeting, and Kate noticed he wore a silver star on his vest. "The sheriff." "Mrs. Quinn," he called as she pulled the wagon to a stop. "Yes," she replied cautiously, keeping Emma in the wagon. "Can I help you, Sheriff?" "Keegan Quayle," he supplied, stepping off the porch and approaching the wagon. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were a startling green, clear and direct as they met hers. "I apologize for trespassing on your property, madam. I've been tracking the Blackwell gang since they robbed the bank in Willow Creek yesterday." Kate's grip tightened on Emma's hand. "Did they come through here?" Sheriff Keeyle nodded grimly. "They did. Stopped for water at your well from the looks of it. They're headed for the mountains, I reckon." "Did they take anything?" Kate asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Not that I could tell. Your livestock seems intact, though they're wandering freely. Your north fence is down." "Yes, I know," Kate sighed. "I haven't had time to repair it." The sheriff's gaze traveled over her, taking in her exhausted face and mud-splattered dress, then shifted to Emma, who was watching him with wide, curious eyes. "This your little one?" he asked, his voice gentling. "This is Emma," Kate said. "Emma, say hello to Sheriff Keeyle." "Hello," Emma said shyly, pressing closer to Kate. "Are you going to catch the bad men?" A small smile lifted the corner of the sheriff's mouth. "That's right, Miss Emma. That's exactly what I'm going to do." "You're welcome to water your horse," Kate offered, noting the sheriff's mount tethered to a post nearby. "Obliged," he said, replacing his hat. "But then I should be on my way. They've got a good head start, and I aim to catch them before they reach the territorial line." Kate nodded, climbing down from the wagon and lifting Emma after her. As they walked toward the cabin, Kate became acutely aware of how unkempt everything had become in just the few short weeks since James's death. The garden was overgrown, the chicken coop needed repair, and the pile of unsplit logs mocked her with their untamed bulk. Sheriff Keeyle seemed to notice too, his keen eyes taking in the state of the ranch as he led his horse to the well. "Your husband away?" he asked casually as he worked the pump. Kate stiffened, then exhaled slowly. "My husband died 3 weeks ago, typhoid." The sheriff's hand stilled on the pump handle. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Quinn, truly." "Thank you," she said automatically, the words worn smooth with repetition. Emma tugged at Kate's skirt. "Mama, I'm hungry." "Go on inside, sweetheart. I'll be there in a moment," Kate said, giving her a gentle push toward the cabin door. Once Emma was inside, Kate turned back to the sheriff. "Sheriff Keeyle, before you go, could I ask, have there been other robberies? Should I be concerned about the Blackwells returning?" Keegan Quayle's expression grew serious. "The Blackwells don't usually target homesteads. They prefer banks and stagecoaches, but they are unpredictable. It might be wise for you to stay in town until they're caught." Kate gave a bitter laugh. "That's not possible. This ranch is all we have left. I can't abandon it." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, his green eyes thoughtful. "It's not safe for a woman and child alone out here, especially with outlaws in the area. Have you family nearby who could help?" "No, no family." Kate straightened her spine. "We'll manage, Sheriff. We've been managing." He glanced pointedly at the downed fence and the neglected woodpile. "All due respect, madam, but it doesn't look like you're managing well." Kate felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Well, I didn't ask for your assessment, did I?" "Good day, Sheriff. I hope you catch your outlaws." She turned on her heel and marched toward the cabin, anger and humiliation burning through her. Behind her, she heard the sheriff sigh, then the sound of his boots on the packed earth as he returned to his horse. Inside the cabin, Emma was attempting to reach the flour sack on a high shelf. "I'm helping, Mama," she announced as Kate entered. "That's very sweet, but let me get that," Kate said, reaching past her daughter to retrieve the flour. As she did, she heard hoofbeats outside, signaling the sheriff's departure. Good riddance, she thought, even as a small part of her recognized the foolishness of turning away the only authority figure for miles. That evening, as darkness fell, Kate found herself jumping at every sound from outside. The sheriff's warning about the Blackwell gang had lodged firmly in her mind, feeding her fears. She double-checked the lock on the door and placed James's old shotgun beside her bed before tucking Emma in for the night. "Sing to me, Mama," Emma requested sleepily. Kate settled beside her daughter and began to hum softly, a hymn her own mother had sung to her as a child. Emma's eyelids grew heavy, and soon she was asleep, her small chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Kate remained awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind churning with worries. The laundry work in town would help, but it wouldn't be enough. She needed to find a way to keep the ranch going, to make it profitable again. For Emma's sake, and for James's memory. The next morning dawned clear and cold, a reminder that winter was approaching faster than Kate cared to acknowledge. After breakfast, she set Emma up with some simple tasks, sorting beans for dinner and practicing her letters while she tackled the most urgent chore, repairing the north fence. The work was grueling. James had made it look easy, but Kate quickly discovered that digging post holes and setting fence posts required strength she wasn't sure she possessed. By midday, she had managed only 2 posts, and her hands were raw despite the gloves she wore. She was struggling with a 3rd post when the sound of an approaching rider caught her attention. Straightening, she shaded her eyes against the sun, her heart quickening at the thought that it might be the Blackwell gang returning. Instead, she recognized Sheriff Keel's broad-shouldered silhouette. He rode up to where she stood, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "Mrs. Quinn," he greeted her, tipping his hat. "Sheriff," she replied stiffly. "I thought you'd be halfway to the territorial line by now." "I was," he said, dismounting in one fluid motion. "But I lost their trail in the rocks. They're clever, the Blackwells. I've circled back to see if I missed anything." Kate doubted his story but didn't challenge it. "Well, they haven't returned here." Sheriff Keegle nodded, his gaze moving from Kate to the fence post she'd been setting. Without comment, he removed his duster and hung it on his saddle horn, then rolled up his shirt sleeves. "What are you doing?" Kate asked, bewildered. "Helping," he said simply, picking up the post-hole digger she'd been using. "This is a two-person job at least." Kate opened her mouth to refuse, then closed it again. Pride wouldn't feed Emma or keep their cattle from wandering off. "Thank you," she managed. They worked side by side for the next few hours, with Sheriff Keegle doing the bulk of the heavy labor. Kate was impressed despite herself at how efficiently he worked, his movements economical and practiced. It was clear he'd done this kind of work before. "You know your way around a ranch," she observed during a brief water break. He nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Grew up on one in Texas. Worked it with my pa until I was 17. "What happened then?" Kate asked, genuinely curious. A shadow passed over his face. "War happened. Confederacy called and I answered. After that, well, ranching didn't seem like the life for me anymore." Kate understood the unspoken trauma in his words. Many men had returned from the war changed, unable to settle back into their former lives. James had been one of the lucky ones, finding peace in the wide open spaces of Montana territory. "Where's Emma?" Sheriff Keegle asked, changing the subject. "Inside, I hope," Kate said, suddenly realizing she hadn't checked on her daughter in some time. "I should go," she was interrupted by a small voice calling, "Mama! Mama, look what I found!" Emma came running across the yard, her hands cupped together, her face alight with excitement. She stopped short when she spotted the sheriff, immediately shifting to hide behind Kate's skirts. "It's all right, Emma," Kate assured her. "You remember Sheriff Keegle from yesterday." Emma peeked around at the tall man who had crouched down to her level. "What did you find, Miss Emma?" he asked gently. Slowly, Emma extended her cupped hands, opening them to reveal a smooth, round stone with a fossil embedded in it. "It's a magic stone," she announced, "with a fairy inside." Sheriff Keegle examined the fossil seriously. "Well now, that is special. That's not a fairy, though. That's the print of a creature that lived here a long, long time ago." Emma's eyes widened. "Like the dinosaurs in Pa's book." "Exactly like that," he confirmed. Kate watched the interaction with surprise. James had always been wonderful with Emma, patient and engaged, but she hadn't expected such gentleness from the stern-faced sheriff. "Emma, why don't you go back inside now? It's getting warm out here," Kate suggested. "Can I show Sheriff Keegle my other treasures first?" Emma asked, already tugging at the man's hand. Before Kate could refuse, Sheriff Keegle smiled at Emma. "I'd be honored to see your treasures, Miss Emma, but only if your ma says it's all right." Both turned expectant faces to Kate, who found herself oddly moved by the sight. "Just for a little while," she relented. "The sheriff has work to do." As Emma led the sheriff toward the cabin, chattering excitedly about her collection of special stones, Kate found herself following, curious to see more of this unexpected side of Keegan Quayle. Inside the cabin, Emma proudly displayed her small wooden box of treasures, stones, feathers, a butterfly wing preserved between two small glass plates, a gift from James, and other natural wonders she'd collected. Sheriff Keegle examined each item with appropriate gravity, asking questions that made Emma beam with pride. Kate busied herself preparing coffee, sneaking glances at the pair seated at the table. "My pa gave me that," Emma said, pointing to the butterfly wing, "before he went to heaven." The sheriff's expression softened. "He must have loved you very much." "He did," Emma confirmed solemnly. "Mama says he's watching me from heaven now." "I believe that," Sheriff Keeyle said, his voice gentle. Kate turned away, blinking back sudden tears. She carried the coffee pot to the table, pouring a cup for the sheriff and one for herself. "Thank you for your help with the fence," she said, changing the subject. "It would have taken me days to do what we accomplished this afternoon." He accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "It's the least I could do. Keeping law and order means more than just chasing outlaws. It means making sure folks are safe and secure." "Is that why you became a sheriff?" Kate asked. Sheriff Keeyle took a sip of his coffee before answering. "After the war, I drifted for a while. Did some cowboying, some prospecting. Never found what I was looking for until I pinned on a badge. There's something about standing between good folks and those who do them harm that feels right." There was more to the story, Kate suspected, but she didn't press. Everyone in the West had a past they didn't discuss freely. "Will you stay for supper, Sheriff?" The invitation surprised Kate as much as it seemed to surprise the sheriff. "It's just beans and cornbread, but there's plenty." "I wouldn't want to impose," he said, though Kate could see the way his eyes brightened at the offer. "Please stay," Emma chimed in. "You can tell me about being a sheriff." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, when a young lady asks so nicely, how can I refuse?" As Kate prepared their simple meal, she found herself wondering at the turn the day had taken. This morning, she'd been determined to manage alone, to prove to herself and perhaps to James's memory that she could sustain what they'd built together. Now she was cooking supper for the sheriff who had, in a few hours, accomplished what would have taken her days of backbreaking labor. Supper was a livelier affair than the Quinn cabin had seen in weeks. Emma, usually subdued during meals since James's death, peppered Sheriff Keeyle with questions about his horse, his badge, and the outlaws he chased. The sheriff answered with patience and humor, occasionally catching Kate's eye over Emma's head with a smile that made Kate feel strangely warm. As dusk fell, Sheriff Keeyle rose to take his leave. "I should be getting back to town. Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Quinn." "Kate," she found herself saying. "You can call me Kate." Something shifted in his green eyes. "Kate," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. "Thank you." At the door, Emma suddenly wrapped her arms around the sheriff's legs in a fierce hug. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked, looking up at him with hope in her eyes. Sheriff Keeyle glanced at Kate, clearly unsure how to respond. "The sheriff has important work to do, Emma," Kate said gently. "Actually," Sheriff Keeyle said slowly, "I need to keep searching this area for signs of the Blackwells. I could stop by tomorrow, check that the fence is holding." "We'd appreciate that," Kate said, ignoring the flutter in her stomach at the prospect of seeing him again. After he'd ridden away into the gathering darkness, Emma turned to Kate with a solemn expression. "I like Sheriff Keeyle. He's nice like Pa." Kate's heart squeezed painfully. "Yes, he seems like a good man." That night, as Kate lay in bed, she found her thoughts turning repeatedly to the sheriff. There was something about him, a steadiness, a quiet strength that reminded her of James in some ways, yet he was distinctly his own person. The way he'd worked alongside her without making her feel helpless, the gentle way he'd interacted with Emma. Kate shook her head, dispelling the thoughts. She was lonely and vulnerable, and Sheriff Keeyle was simply doing his job, looking out for a widow and child on the frontier. Nothing more. True to his word, Sheriff Keeyle returned the next day and the day after that. Each visit, He found some way to help around the ranch, splitting logs for the woodpile, repairing the chicken coop, reinforcing the barn door before winter storms could damage it. Kate initially protested that he had more important duties, but he waved off her concerns. "The Blackwells have gone to ground," he explained as he worked on the barn. "Until I get word of another sighting, my deputy can handle things in town." By the end of the week, Kate found herself watching for his arrival, a strange anticipation building within her that she hadn't felt since the early days with James. Emma, too, had grown attached to the sheriff, running to greet him whenever his horse appeared on the horizon. On Saturday, Kate made her first trip into town for her laundry work at the hotel. Sheriff Keegle insisted on escorting them, citing continued concerns about the Blackwell gang, though they'd seen no sign of the outlaws. As they rode together, Emma perched in front of the sheriff on his horse while Kate drove the wagon. Kate found herself studying his profile against the morning sky. "You've been very kind to us," she said finally. "I don't know how to repay you." Sheriff Keegle glanced over at her, his expression serious. "There's nothing to repay, Kate. I've enjoyed the time at your ranch. It reminds me of simpler days." In town, the sheriff accompanied them to the hotel where Mrs. Peterson raised an eyebrow at the sight of Kate arriving with the lawman, but made no comment. Emma was reluctant to be separated from Sheriff Keegle, but he promised to check on them before they headed back to the ranch. "You be good for your mama," he told Emma, who nodded solemnly. As he walked away toward the sheriff's office, Kate caught Mrs. Peterson watching her with interest. "Sheriff Keel's a good man," the older woman remarked as she led Kate to the laundry room. "Lost his wife in childbirth some years back before he came to Willow Creek. Never remarried." Kate wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected information. "He's been helpful since James passed," she said carefully. Mrs. Peterson hummed knowingly but said nothing more. The laundry work was hard and hot, but Kate tackled it with determination, grateful for the coins Mrs. Peterson counted into her palm at day's end. It wasn't much, but it would help them get through the winter. As promised, Sheriff Keegle met them as they prepared to leave town, insisting on escorting them back to the ranch. The journey seemed shorter with his company, with Emma chattering happily, and the sheriff occasionally pointing out wildlife or interesting landmarks to the delighted child. At the ranch, Kate invited him to stay for supper again, an invitation that was becoming increasingly common. As they sat at the table, Emma yawned widely, exhausted from the day's excitement. "I think someone's ready for bed," Kate observed, smiling at her daughter. "But I want to stay up with you and Sheriff Keegle," Emma protested through another yawn. "How about I tell you a story before you go to sleep?" the sheriff offered. Emma's face lit up. "Yes, please." After helping Kate clear the table, Sheriff Keegle followed them into Emma's small bedroom. Kate sat on the edge of the bed, and to her surprise, the sheriff settled on the floor beside it, his long legs stretched out before him. "What kind of story would you like, Miss Emma?" he asked. "A story about a princess," Emma requested promptly. "And a horse." Sheriff Keegle chuckled. "I think I can manage that." The story he told was simple but charming, about a princess who could talk to horses and used her gift to help her kingdom during a drought. Emma's eyes grew heavy as he spoke, his deep voice soothing and rhythmic in the small room. By the time he finished, Emma was fast asleep, one hand tucked beneath her cheek. Kate pulled the blanket up to her daughter's chin, then motioned for the sheriff to follow her from the room. "You're good with her," Kate said softly as they returned to the main room of the cabin. "Have you spent much time around children?" A shadow crossed his face. "Not as much as I'd have liked." Kate remembered what Mrs. Peterson had said about his wife dying in childbirth and regretted her question. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." Sheriff Keegle shook his head. "It's all right." It was a long time ago. He moved to stand by the window, looking out at the darkness. My wife, Sarah, died having our son. He lived only a few hours after she passed. Kate's heart ached for him. I'm so sorry, Sheriff. Keegan, he said, turning to face her. If I'm calling you Kate, you should call me Keegan. Keegan, she repeated softly. Something changed in the air between them, a shift so subtle Kate might have imagined it if not for the intensity in Keegan's green eyes as they met hers. I should go, he said after a moment, though he made no move toward the door. Yes, Kate agreed, equally motionless. For several heartbeats, they simply looked at each other. Then Keegan cleared his throat and reached for his hat on the table. I'll come by tomorrow, check on that roof leak you mentioned, he said, his voice deliberately casual. Thank you, Kate said. We'd like that. At the door he paused. Kate, what you're doing here, carrying on alone, raising Emma, it's remarkable. James would be proud. Tears stung Kate's eyes at the unexpected words. I hope so, she whispered. Impulsively, she reached out and touched his arm. Thank you for everything, Keegan. His hand covered hers briefly, warm and calloused. Good night, Kate. After he left, Kate stood at the window, watching until his figure disappeared into the darkness. Her heart was pounding in a way it hadn't in years, and the sensation was both thrilling and terrifying. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Kate worked at the hotel on Mondays and Thursdays, with Keegan often escorting her and Emma to and from town. On other days, he would appear at the ranch, always with some task he insisted needed his attention. The woodpile grew to an impressive size, the cabin roof was patched, the barn made secure for winter, and the remaining cattle properly penned. October gave way to November, bringing the first snow and colder temperatures. Kate worried about Keegan riding to their ranch in increasingly harsh weather, but he waved off her concerns. I've ridden through worse, he told her one evening as they sat before the fire, Emma asleep in her room. Besides, I like to make sure you and Emma are safe. Is there still danger from the Blackwells? Kate asked, noticing how the firelight caught the silver in his hair. Keegan's expression grew serious. There's been no sign of them for weeks. They've likely moved on to another territory. He hesitated, then added, but that doesn't mean I don't still worry about you two out here alone. Kate studied him, suddenly curious. Keegan, why have you really been spending so much time here? And don't say it's because of the Blackwells. He looked down at his hands, strong and capable in the firelight. At first it was concern. A woman and child alone on a remote ranch. It didn't sit right with me. He raised his eyes to hers. Then it was because Emma reminded me of the child I never got to know. Kate's breath caught in her throat. And now, she asked softly. Keegan held her gaze steadily. Now it's because the thought of not seeing you both has become unbearable. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable in a way that touched Kate deeply. She had been so focused on survival, on keeping Emma fed and warm, that she'd barely allowed herself to acknowledge the growing feelings she had for Keegan Quayle. I still miss James, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll always love him. I know, Keegan said gently. Just as I'll always remember Sarah. But Kate, I think there's room in a heart for more than one love. Kate felt tears well in her eyes. I'm afraid, she admitted. Afraid of losing someone else I care about. Keegan reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. I can't promise nothing will ever happen to me, but I can promise that while I'm here, I'll do everything in my power to protect you and Emma, to care for you both as James would have wanted. A tear slipped down Kate's cheek. Emma adores you. And I've grown to love her as if she were my own, Keegan said, his voice thick with emotion. Both of you have become everything to me. Before Kate could respond, a gust of wind rattled the windows and the fire flickered in the draft. Keegan glanced outside at the swirling snow. "I should go before it gets worse," he said reluctantly, though he made no move to release her hand. "Stay," Kate said, surprising herself with her boldness. At Keegan's raised eyebrow, she hastily added, "In the barn, I mean. It's too dangerous to ride back to town in this weather." Keegan considered this, then nodded. "That would be wise. Thank you." As he prepared to brave the short distance to the barn, bundling into his duster and pulling his hat low, Kate impulsively stood on tiptoe and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Keegan," she whispered. His green eyes darkened with emotion. "Good night, Kate." That night, knowing Keegan was sleeping just yards away in the barn, Kate found it difficult to fall asleep. Her thoughts kept returning to their conversation, to the way his hand had felt holding hers, to the look in his eyes when he'd spoken of caring for her and Emma. Was she betraying James by having these feelings? Or was Keegan right? Was there room in her heart for another love, one that didn't diminish what she'd had with her husband? Morning arrived with clear skies and a fresh blanket of snow covering the landscape. Kate rose early, stoking the fire and preparing breakfast with unusual care. When Emma woke, she was delighted to learn that the sheriff had stayed the night in the barn. "Can we bring him breakfast?" she asked eagerly. "That's a fine idea," Kate agreed, wrapping biscuits and bacon in a cloth. They bundled up against the cold and made their way through the snow to the barn, where they found Keegan already awake, tending to his horse. "We brought breakfast," Emma announced, holding up the bundle proudly. Keegan's face broke into a warm smile. "That's mighty kind of you, Miss Emma. And you look pretty as a picture with those snowflakes in your hair." Emma giggled, spinning in a circle to make her coat flare out. As they shared the simple meal in the barn, sitting on hay bales with Keegan's horse occasionally nickering softly, Kate felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in months. There was something right about being here with Keegan and Emma, something that felt like family. The blizzard that had threatened the night before had passed them by, but it had left enough snow to make travel difficult. Keegan reluctantly announced that he should get back to town to check on things at the sheriff's office. "Will you come back soon?" Emma asked, clinging to his hand. Keegan crouched down to her level. "As soon as I can, little one, I promise." Emma threw her arms around his neck in a fierce hug that made Kate's heart swell. As Keegan prepared his horse for the ride to town, Kate stood nearby, watching him work. "What you said last night," she began hesitantly, "about there being room in a heart for more than one love." Keegan paused, turning to face her. "Yes, I think you might be right," Kate said softly. The hope that bloomed on Keegan's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Kate, I'm not saying I'm ready for everything," she hastened to add, "but I care for you, Keegan, more than I expected to care for anyone after James." Keegan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I can wait, Kate, for as long as you need." Impulsively, Kate reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Keegan caught her hand, turning it to press a kiss to her palm that sent warmth cascading through her. "Be safe riding back to town," she whispered. "I will," he promised. "And I'll be back as soon as I can." 3 days passed before Kate saw Keegan again. 3 days of watching the horizon whenever she stepped outside, of Emma asking repeatedly when the sheriff would return. When he finally appeared, riding through the snow-covered landscape toward their cabin, both Kate and Emma rushed outside to greet him. "Sheriff Keegan," Emma cried, launching herself through the snow toward him. Keegan dismounted, catching Emma as she barreled into him. "Hello, Miss Emma," he laughed, swinging her up into his arms. "Have you been looking after your mama?" "Yes, sir," Emma said solemnly. "And I've been practicing my letters just like you showed me." Keegan's gaze moved past Emma to Kate standing a few feet away. "Hello, Kate," he said softly. "Hello, Keegan," she replied, suddenly shy under the intensity of his gaze. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Kate and Keegan sat before the fire again, this time side by side on the small sofa James had built years ago. "I missed you," Kate admitted, looking into the flames rather than at him. "Both of us did." "I missed you too," Keegan said, "more than I can say." He reached for her hand and Kate let him take it, feeling the now familiar warmth of his skin against hers. "Kate," he began, his voice serious, "I need to tell you something." Kate's heart stuttered with sudden fear. "What is it?" "I received a telegram from the marshal in Helena. They've captured 2 of the Blackwell brothers." "That's good news, isn't it?" Kate asked, puzzled by his grave expression. "It is," Keegan agreed, "but the 3rd brother, Jasper, is still at large. And there's reason to believe he's heading back this way." Kate's hand tightened in his. "Why would he come back here? Revenge, possibly. I was close to capturing all 3 when they passed through here. Or maybe he thinks they left something behind." Keegan shook his head. "Whatever the reason, I need you and Emma to be extra cautious. Don't go anywhere alone and keep the shotgun close." "You're frightening me," Kate said quietly. Keegan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I don't mean to scare you, but I need you to be alert. I've increased patrols in the area and I'll be checking on you even more frequently. But until Jasper Blackwell is captured, we need to be vigilant." Kate nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. "We'll be careful, I promise." Keegan's expression softened. "I won't let anything happen to you or Emma, I swear it." The conviction in his voice warmed Kate despite her fears. She believed him believed that this man would do anything to protect them. "I know," she said simply. Their eyes met and held, and Kate felt herself drawn toward him as if by an invisible force. Keegan's gaze dropped to her lips, and he leaned forward slightly, hesitating as if asking permission. Kate closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deepened as Keegan's arms went around her, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, Kate was breathless, her heart racing. Keegan rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I sat by this fire with you," he confessed. Kate smiled, feeling a happiness she'd thought lost to her forever. "I'm glad you finally did." The days that followed were filled with a strange mixture of joy and tension. Keegan visited daily, often staying late into the evening. His relationship with Kate deepened, marked by stolen kisses and long conversations by the fire after Emma was asleep. Yet underlying these sweet moments was the constant awareness of danger, the knowledge that somewhere out there, Jasper Blackwell was at large and possibly seeking revenge. December arrived with even colder temperatures and heavier snowfall. Christmas was approaching, and Emma spoke excitedly about it each day, wondering if Santa would find them at the ranch and if Sheriff Keegan would spend the holiday with them. "I'd like nothing better," Keegan told her one evening as they worked together to string popcorn for the small pine tree he'd cut and brought to the cabin. Kate, watching them from the kitchen where she was preparing supper, felt her heart swell with love for this man, who had become so integral to their lives in such a short time. She still missed James, still spoke of him to Emma and kept his photograph on the mantel, but the raw pain of grief had softened into something more like fond remembrance. And in its place had grown something new, a deep, abiding love for Keegan Quayle, with his quiet strength, his gentle way with Emma, and the way he looked at Kate as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Penny for your thoughts," Keegan said, coming up behind her as Emma continued working on the popcorn string. Kate smiled up at him. I was just thinking how fortunate we are to have you in our lives. Keegan's arms slipped around her waist. I'm the fortunate one, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door, a rare occurrence at the isolated ranch, especially in winter. Keegan immediately tensed, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. Stay here, he said to Kate, his voice low and serious. Kate nodded, gathering Emma close as Keegan approached the door cautiously. She held her breath as he called out, "Who's there?" "It's Deputy Miller, Sheriff," came the muffled reply. "Got an urgent message for you." Keegan relaxed slightly but still opened the door with caution. The young deputy stood on the porch, snow covering his hat and shoulders, his face red from the cold. "Sorry to intrude, Sheriff Mrs. Quinn," he said, tipping his hat to Kate, "but I rode out as soon as the telegram came in. Jasper Blackwell was spotted in Millerville, heading this way. The marshal thinks he's coming back for the money his brothers hid before they were captured." Keegan's expression hardened. "When was this sighting?" "Yesterday morning. He could be in the area by now." "Thank you, Deputy." "Ride back to town and organize a search party. I'll stay here with Mrs. Quinn and her daughter tonight." After Deputy Miller left, Keegan secured the cabin, checking and loading both his revolver and Kate's shotgun. His face was grim as he explained to Kate what the deputy had told him. The Blackwells must have hidden their stolen money somewhere in this area when they passed through. That's why Jasper's coming back. "Do you think he hid it here on our property?" Kate asked, fear tightening her chest. "It's possible. They stopped here for water, remember?" Keegan paced the small room, thinking. The barn, maybe, or near the well. Emma, sensing the tension, climbed into Kate's lap. "Are the bad men coming back, Mama?" Kate stroked her daughter's hair. "We don't know, sweetheart, but Sheriff Keegan is here to keep us safe." Emma nodded solemnly, accepting this with the simple faith of childhood. "Sheriff Keegan will shoot the bad men if they come," she stated with certainty. Keegan knelt before them, his face gentle despite the worry in his eyes. "Let's pray it doesn't come to that, Miss Emma. But yes, I'll protect you and your mama, no matter what." That night, after Emma was finally asleep despite her anxiety, Kate and Keegan sat at the table, speaking in low voices. "I want you and Emma to go into town tomorrow," Keegan said. "Stay with the Jenkins until this is resolved." Kate shook her head. "We can't abandon the ranch. The cattle can survive a few days," Keegan interrupted. "Your lives are what matter." "This is our home, Keegan," Kate said firmly. "I won't be driven from it by fear. Besides, the roads are nearly impassable with the recent snow." Keegan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Kate, please, if anything happened to you or Emma." Kate reached across the table, taking his hand. "Nothing will happen. You're here and you've taught me how to use the shotgun properly. We'll be careful." Keegan sighed, knowing from the set of her jaw that she wouldn't be swayed. "At least promise me you'll stay inside with the doors locked until I return from the search tomorrow." "I promise," Kate agreed. They settled in for a tense night, with Keegan taking the first watch while Kate tried to rest on the sofa. Neither slept much, both starting at every creak of the cabin and whistle of wind outside. Morning came with no sign of trouble, but Keegan's expression remained grave as he prepared to join the search party. "I'll be back by nightfall," he promised, holding Kate close at the door. "Keep the shotgun with you and don't open the door for anyone but me." Kate nodded against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "Be careful, Keegan. I couldn't bear to lose you too." He tilted her face up to his, kissing her with a fierce tenderness that left her breathless. "You won't lose me, Kate. I promise you that." After he left, Kate secured the door and tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Emma's sake. They practiced letters, baked cookies for Christmas, and worked on more decorations for their tree. But Kate's eyes constantly strayed to the window, scanning the snow-covered landscape for any sign of movement. It was mid-afternoon when Emma, who had been napping, woke crying from a nightmare. "Mama! Mama!" She sobbed, running from her bedroom into the main room where Kate was mending one of Keegan's shirts. "What is it, sweetheart?" Kate asked, gathering her daughter into her arms. "I dreamed the bad men took you away," Emma hiccuped through her tears. "Like they took Pa." "Oh, Emma," Kate sighed, holding her close. "No one's going to take me away, and remember, Pa wasn't taken by bad men. He got very sick." "But he's still gone," Emma said, her small face wet with tears. "And I miss him." "I know, sweet pea, I miss him too." Kate rocked her daughter gently, humming the hymn that always seemed to comfort Emma. As Kate hummed and Emma's sobs gradually subsided, a shadow passed by the window. Kate's heart lurched, and she immediately reached for the shotgun propped against the wall nearby, keeping Emma in her arms. "What's wrong, Mama?" Emma asked, sensing her tension. "Nothing, sweetheart. I just thought I saw something outside. Probably just a deer," Kate said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the fear coursing through her. She set Emma down on the sofa. "Stay here very quietly. I'm going to check the window." Moving cautiously to the window, Kate peered out, the shotgun ready in her hands. The yard appeared empty, the snow undisturbed except for the tracks Keegan had left that morning. Had she imagined the shadow? Kate was about to turn away when a movement near the barn caught her eye. A man, tall and bearded, was slipping inside. Jasper Blackwell. Kate's hands tightened on the shotgun. He must be searching for the hidden money. If he found it and left without approaching the cabin, perhaps they would be safe. But what if he decided to check the cabin as well? Or worse, what if he had already seen Keegan's tracks leading to and from the cabin and realized someone was helping the widow and her child? Kate made a quick decision. "Emma, listen to me," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I need you to hide in the special place Papa showed you, remember, under the floorboards in my room." Emma's eyes widened. "Are the bad men here? I'm not sure, but I want you to be safe. Go now, quickly and quietly, and don't come out until I come for you." "Or Sheriff Keegan," Kate added, praying that Keegan would return soon. Emma, her face solemn, nodded and slipped into Kate's bedroom. Kate followed, helping her lift the loose floorboard that concealed a small storage space James had built for valuables. It was barely big enough for Emma, but the child curled up inside without complaint. "Remember, stay quiet as a mouse," Kate whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead before lowering the floorboard back into place. Then she returned to the main room, shotgun in hand, and positioned herself where she could watch both the door and the window with a clear view of the barn. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching like an hour. Kate's arms ached from holding the shotgun at the ready, but she didn't dare relax her vigilance. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the snow when the barn door opened again. The bearded man emerged, carrying something in his hands, a sack. Kate realized. He had found what he was looking for. For a moment, she allowed herself to hope that he would simply leave now, ride away without ever approaching the cabin. But then he turned, his gaze fixing on the cabin with a determination that sent ice through Kate's veins. He had seen the tracks. He knew someone was here. Kate took a deep breath, steadying herself. She could do this. She had to do this for Emma. The man approached the cabin with deliberate steps. When he reached the porch, he called out in a rough voice, "Hello in the cabin." Kate remained silent, the shotgun aimed at the door. "I know someone's in there," the man continued. "I just want to talk." Still Kate said nothing, praying he would give up and leave. Instead, the doorknob rattled as he tried it, finding it locked. "Open up," he demanded, his tone hardening. "I don't want to hurt nobody, but I will if I have to." Kate's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he must hear it through the door. When she didn't respond, the man kicked at the door, the wood splintering under his boot. Another kick, and the lock gave way, the door swinging open to reveal the bearded man, his own gun drawn. "Well now," he said, his eyes narrowing as he took in Kate with the shotgun. "What have we here?" "Get out of my house," Kate said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I don't want to shoot you, but I will." The man, Jasper Blackwell, Kate was certain, grinned, revealing yellow teeth. "No, you won't, little lady. Because if you pull that trigger and miss, I'll kill you where you stand. Now put down the shotgun." Kate didn't move. "What do you want?" "Just passing through," Blackwell said, his eyes darting around the cabin. "Looking for something that belongs to me and my brothers." "You found it," Kate said, nodding toward the sack in his hand. "Now leave." Blackwell chuckled, the sound sending shivers down Kate's spine. "Not quite yet. See, I know Sheriff Keel's been spending time here. His horse's tracks are all over your yard, and that lawman has something of mine to my brothers, so I think I'll wait for him to return." Kate's blood ran cold at the thought of Keegan walking into an ambush. "He won't be back until tomorrow," she lied. "He's gone to Helena on business." Blackwell's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Is that so? Then whose tracks are leading to and from your cabin today?" Before Kate could answer, a small noise came from the bedroom, a creaking floorboard. "Emma." Blackwell's head turned toward the sound, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Looks like you're not alone after all, Mrs. Quinn," Kate supplied, her mind racing. If she could keep his attention on her, away from Emma. "Kate Quinn." "Well, Mrs. Quinn, why don't you call out whoever's hiding in there? Or shall I go look for myself?" Kate raised the shotgun higher. "Stay where you are." Blackwell's expression hardened. "I won't ask again." The standoff stretched for a tense moment, neither willing to back down. Then, from outside, came the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Blackwell's head whipped toward the window, and in that moment of distraction, Kate pulled the trigger. The shotgun blast was deafening in the small cabin. Blackwell staggered backward, clutching his shoulder where the shot had struck him, but he remained on his feet, his face contorted with rage. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, raising his own gun. Before he could fire, the door burst open again and Keegan charged in, his revolver drawn. "Drop it, Blackwell," he commanded. Blackwell, wounded and now facing the sheriff, hesitated only briefly before swinging his gun toward Keegan. Two shots rang out almost simultaneously, one from Keegan's revolver, one from Kate's shotgun, which she had managed to reload with shaking hands. Blackwell crumpled to the floor, the sack of money falling from his grasp. Kate dropped the shotgun and ran to Keegan, her heart in her throat. "Are you hurt?" "No," he assured her, pulling her into a one-armed embrace while keeping his revolver trained on Blackwell's motionless form. "Are you? Where's Emma?" "I'm fine. Emma's hiding." Kate pulled away and hurried to the bedroom, calling softly, "Emma, it's safe now. You can come out." The floorboard lifted and Emma's tear-streaked face appeared. She scrambled out and threw herself into Kate's arms. "Mama, I heard loud noises." "It's all right, sweetheart," Kate soothed, carrying her back to the main room. "Sheriff Keegan is here. He kept us safe just like he promised." Emma's eyes widened at the sight of the man on the floor, and she buried her face in Kate's shoulder. "Is he dead?" Kate looked at Keegan, who had knelt beside Blackwell to check for a pulse. He nodded grimly. "Yes, he's gone. He can't hurt anyone anymore." Deputy Miller and two other men from the search party arrived moments later, having heard the gunshots. They took charge of Blackwell's body and the recovered money, with Deputy Miller promising to return the next day to take full statements. After they left, the cabin seemed eerily quiet despite the broken door that Keegan temporarily repaired with boards from the woodpile. Emma, exhausted by the day's events, fell asleep on the sofa while Kate made coffee with hands that still trembled occasionally. "You were incredibly brave," Keegan said as they sat at the table, the coffee steaming between them. "Not many would have stood their ground against a man like Blackwell." "I was terrified," Kate admitted, "but I kept thinking of Emma and you and everything I had to lose." Keegan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "When I heard that shot," he shook his head, unable to finish the thought. "I've never been so scared in my life." "I'm just glad you came when you did," Kate said, squeezing his hand. "We found signs of Blackwell's camp about 5 miles east of here. I knew he was close, so I rode back as fast as I could." Keegan's green eyes were intense as they held hers. "Kate, I know this isn't the right time with everything that's happened, but I need to say something." Kate's heart quickened at his serious tone. "What is it?" "I love you," he said simply. "You and Emma both. These past months being with you, helping around the ranch, watching Emma grow, it's given me a purpose I never thought I'd find again after Sarah died." Tears welled in Kate's eyes. "Keegan, you don't have to say anything," he hastened to add. "I know it's soon, and with James, I love you too," Kate interrupted, the words flowing naturally as if she'd been waiting to say them. "I think I have for a while now. Emma does too. You've become everything to us." The joy that bloomed on Keegan's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. He rose, pulling Kate to her feet and into his arms. "Marry me," he whispered against her hair. "Let me take care of you both, be a father to Emma, grow old with you on this ranch." Kate pulled back to look into his eyes, seeing all the love and hope she felt reflected there. "Yes," she said, her heart full to bursting. "Yes, I'll marry you, Keegan Quayle." Their kiss was tender and full of promise, a pledge of the life they would build together. They were married on Christmas Eve in the small church in Willow Creek, with Emma as their flower girl and the whole town in attendance. The Jenkins stood witness, Mrs. Jenkins dabbing at her eyes throughout the simple ceremony. Keegan moved his belongings to the ranch, though he maintained his position as sheriff, riding into town most days, but always returning home to Kate and Emma by nightfall. Together, they made the ranch prosper again, with Keegan's knowledge of cattle and Kate's determination forming a partnership that extended beyond their marriage. Emma thrived under Keegan's loving guidance, calling him Pa of her own accord after they'd been married a few months, though she never forgot her first father. James's photograph remained on the mantel, and they spoke of him often, keeping his memory alive while embracing their new life together. The following Christmas brought another blessing: the news that Kate was expecting a child. Emma, now 6, was ecstatic at the prospect of becoming a big sister, and Keegan's joy knew no bounds. "A baby brother or sister," Emma exclaimed, dancing around the cabin. "Can I help take care of it, Mama?" "Can I? Of course you can," Kate assured her, laughing at her daughter's enthusiasm. That night, after Emma was asleep, Keegan held Kate before the fire, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice soft in her ear. Kate turned in his arms, looking up into the face of the man who had saved them in more ways than one. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. As summer approached, bringing with it the imminent arrival of their child, Kate often reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this point. If James hadn't died, if the Blackwell gang hadn't robbed the bank in Willow Creek, if Keegan hadn't traced their path to the Quinn ranch that autumn day. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" Keegan asked one evening, finding her on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. "How quickly life can change," Kate replied, leaning into him as he sat beside her. "A year ago, I was certain our future held nothing but struggle and hardship. Now look at us." Keegan's arm tightened around her shoulders. Life has a way of surprising us, sometimes with sorrow, sometimes with joy beyond measure. In July 1880, almost 2 years to the day since Keegan first rode onto the Quinn ranch, their son was born, a healthy, robust boy they named James Keegan Quayle, honoring both the father Emma had lost and the one who had chosen her. Emma was fascinated by her baby brother, spending hours watching him sleep and helping Kate in any way her 7-year-old hands could manage. Keegan took to fatherhood as naturally as he had to being Emma's stepfather, handling midnight feedings and diaper changes with the same competence he showed in enforcing the law. Life settled into a new rhythm: mornings with Emma's lessons before she started school in town, afternoons working the ranch, which now boasted a respectable herd of cattle, evenings as a family around the table Keegan had expanded to accommodate their growing family. On Sundays, they attended church in Willow Creek, and afterward they would often visit the cemetery where James Quinn was buried. Emma would place wildflowers on her father's grave, while Kate and Keegan stood nearby, little James sleeping peacefully in Keegan's arms. "I think he would be pleased," Kate said one Sunday, watching Emma arrange her bouquet with careful precision, "to see how happy we are, how well Emma is growing up." "I believe he would," Keegan agreed. "He loved you both enough to want your happiness above all else." As they walked back to the wagon, Emma skipping ahead, baby James gurgling in Kate's arms, Keegan took Kate's free hand in his. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying on the ranch when you could have sold it and moved to town after James died?" Kate looked around at the rolling hills, the distant mountains, the land that had seemed so hostile in those early days but now felt like the only place she could imagine calling home. "Never," she said firmly. "This is where we belong, all of us." Keegan smiled, lifting her hand to press a kiss to her knuckles. "I thank God every day that you're so stubborn." Kate laughed, the sound bright in the summer air. "And I thank him every day that you're so persistent. Coming back day after day to help a widow who was too proud to admit she needed it." "Best decision I ever made," Keegan said, his green eyes warm with love. As they drove home, Emma's voice floated back from where she sat at the front of the wagon with Keegan, learning to handle the reins under his careful instruction. She was singing one of the hymns they'd sung in church that morning, her clear young voice rising pure and sweet in the afternoon sunshine. Kate, cradling their son, joined in, and then Keegan's deeper voice blended with theirs, creating a harmony that seemed to Kate the perfect expression of the life they'd built together, different notes combining to create something beautiful and strong. A family forged through loss and love, resilient as the Montana landscape around them. That night, as she stood on the porch watching the stars appear one by one in the vast sky, Keegan's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy," he murmured. Kate leaned back against his solid warmth, feeling the rise and fall of his chest against her back, hearing the soft sounds of their children sleeping inside the cabin that had become a true home. "Completely," she answered, turning in his arms to kiss him under the starlight, and she was. The path had not been easy, the journey marked by grief and hardship, but it had led her here to this man, these children, this life full of love and purpose. She wouldn't change a single step.